the dignitaries will be joining online, right? So have they joined already?
Yes, they have joined already.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you once again. We're going to start our next panel discussion. The theme being rewilding mountains to mangroves. So before calling our honorable dignitaries on stage, I'd like to have a few words about this particular theme. The World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report 2021 identified that out of the five top major risks to global economies, four are environmental, which include biodiversity loss and climate change. Now, considering the large scale depletion of natural resources and ecosystems, unbridled human activity linked with the spread of pandemic diseases like COVID 19, and the cost of natural disasters means a high risk to the current economic growth trajectory. There is a need to think beyond GDP and short term profit to restore our relationship with the planet and work towards a viable future. It is necessary to set nature positive goals to achieve the targets set by the nations at the Glasgow Climate Pact. The definition of net nature positive must, however, be open to the criticism of the concept of greenwashing as well. That it is unacceptable to destroy nature in one place and make restoration efforts elsewhere, while creating the false impression that the country's policies are more environmentally friendly than they actually are, something that is increasingly threatening the fragile ecosystems of the eastern Himalayan region. We'll hear a lot from our special dignitaries of this particular panel discussion. So, before inviting our special dignitaries, the honorable guests of this particular panel discussion, let me share a particular thing, which is Dr. Ruchika Singh, the director, World Resources Institute, India. She'll be joining us online along with Mr. Vishwa Ranjan, Asia Regional Office, IUCN. He'll be joining us online as well. Now, I would like to humbly request our dignitaries, Mr. Raquibul Amin, Country Representative, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, Bangladesh, the chair of this panel discussion, to come up on stage and take his seat. Sir, a round of applause for sir. We have Mr. Sonam Tobgay, the Chief Forestry Officer, Ministry of Agriculture and Forests, Royal Government of Bhutan. Sir. We are also delighted to have Mr. Iqbal Abdullah Harun, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bangladesh. A round of applause for sir. We also have Mr. Amba Jamir, Integrated Mountain Initiative. At this point, I would like to humbly request if we already have the two of our dignitaries online. So this panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Raquibul Amin. So I'd like to request sir to start this particular session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an interesting topic that we're going to discuss, though not many participants I can see, um, but I hope there are a lot of on the online. Rewilding mountains and mangroves, that's the basic theme that we like to highlight. We are talking when there's a negotiation is going on in Montreal on 30 by 30. One of the objective that I think the world leaders will agree is to the restoration of or conserving 30% of the world wilderness areas or areas by 2030. It's quite a big challenge. And the next question is, okay, we conserve 30%, but what about the rest 70%? What are the key challenges there? Because there are more biodiversity outside than the protected areas. At the same time, as a presenter has mentioned, we are going through a colossal change, and even the session before we have had the challenges that we are facing in the world, the unprecedented loss of biodiversity at the rate where we're probably going to lose about 1 million species by end of this decade. Sorry, I mean within 15 years. And at the same time, the climate change, the double jeopardy of climate change and biodiversity loss, and on top of that, the pollution that we are witnessing. So in this, very challenging setting that we are living, we have end up, and we are leaving the next generation. Uh, what can be done? What are the challenges and what are the solutions? As last session we have had, Saurabh has repeatedly mentioned the solutions we already know, but it needs to be applied. But where are the gaps? So these are the few issues that we will be discussing. We have heard the name of the distinguished panelist, Mr. Sonam Tobgay, Chief Forestry Officer, Ministry of Environment, Minister of Agriculture and Forest, Royal Government of Bhutan. We also have Ruchika Singh, Director, Sustainable Landscape and Restoration Program, World Resource Institute, Amba Jamir, Founder Member, Integrated Mountain Initiative, Mr. Iqbal Abdullah Harun, Additional Secretary, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of Bangladesh. We have Vishwa Ranjan Sinha, Program Officer, my colleague in Bangkok, um, sitting in IUCN office. We also have Dr. Ashok Khosla, just sitting beside us. So we will also be coming to you to pick your, to listen to your wise words, how you have seen the changes when we started our environmentalism. We look up to you as a guru. So the how you started and where you are now and how you see the future. So we'll get back to you, Dr. Khosla. But let me start with Sonam Tobgay, since we are talking about rewilding mountains to mangroves. Let's start from the mountains, the high mountain in Bhutan. So, Mr. Tobgay, if you can tell us a little bit about your experience. Bhutan is probably the only country in the world who has put happiness in the counting of national prosperity, and how it transpire into conservation of nature. And we know possibly the only few countries which has a high tree coverage, forest coverage. How is possible? And what the lessons you offer for other countries, especially in the Eastern Himalaya? If you can tell about your few experience.
Thank you. Uh, First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Bali Para Foundation for having me here with this uh, uh, elite gentleman here. So at the same time, to get back to your question, especially with regard to Bhutan's environmental conservation efforts, I think this is mainly due to the very far-sighted and the visionary monarchs we had, whereby we have environmental conservation as one of the main pillars uh, in our development philosophy called the gross national happiness, which is the main, like driving vision for the country. So, at the same time, now if I break it down to the sectoral, environmental conservation aspect, Bhutan takes environmental conservation very seriously. This is due to the fact that we are aware that we live in a very fragile and mountainous region, and for us, we believe that environmental conservation is not just an occupation for the government, but it is our lifeline. And that's why I think the rural government pursues, the development planning, whereby it is aspired that we put nature at the core of our development planning efforts, and be it at the local or the national level. And at the same time, uh, now I think in the present days, I think the natural and the biodiversity loss, just like the like any other countries across the globe, even Bhutan is not spared with the impacts of climate change. However, we aspire to do our bit so that we contribute to mitigating the climate change efforts. So this due to the fact that Bhutan has a 71% forest cover, and that I think is I would say I would like to mention that Bhutan is the first carbon negative countries in the world, and I think we sequester around 5 million tons of carbon annually. So Bhutan is carbon sink in the region. I think at the present, and now I think we have a few other countries which are carbon negative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an interesting aspect of, bringing carbon in the conservation, and putting the country in the carbon neutral path, um, and something to be followed by other countries. And to do that, I think you need a lot of, going to the carbon market, or the conservation, that side. You need a lot of data. You need a lot of, monitoring. In terms of that, maybe I'll ask Ruchika to come in now and talk about a data gap, or the data need, um, in her work, because I see she has been working in the sustainable landscape restoration for a long time, and director of sustainable landscape restoration program of World Resource Institute of India. So Ruchika, if you can highlight a little bit on this aspect of, um, over to you, Ruchika.
Thanks. Really important question. I mean, data plays a important role when we talk about any planning that we need to do, whether it's around restoration, whether we call it rewilding, whether we want to kind of really monitor where we are in terms of our progress. And I'll pick on from where the last speaker sort of talking about there are various climate commitments. I mean, if I take the India's example, we've made climate commitments under the bond challenge. We have the land degradation neutrality target, as well as commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as several of the SDGs. And if we have to plan and in meeting any of for these commitments, what becomes essential is also looking at how do we develop inclusive restoration plans, which really sort of speak to local stakeholder priorities. And that's where issues of data become important, but also what that data really leads to is what I'd like to highlight. I think looking at different types of information that one can kind of glean from data, whether, for instance, if we look at biophysical sort of data, there's a lot of scientific knowledge that can be generated. But if we look at local traditional sort of knowledge and data that's emerging from there, so essentially any planning, when we look at the fragile landscapes of eastern Himalayas, and or if I talk about northeast specifically as well, there's a need really to understand what really are the current land use challenges that exist. How do we sort of understand what the demands or local stakeholder priorities are? And here Because restoration, for instance, is not just about the biophysical part of it, but really what local communities and stakeholder priorities. And of course, important issue to unpack would be unpacking what community means, whether it's indigenous communities or tribal population, whether it's Dalits or Dalits, for instance, or the scheduled castes in the Indian context. So there's a whole, or women. So what kind of data is important when we the so any sort of planning needs to look at different kind of data sets. So one of the experience, just to talk about it a little more, we've done in Northeast, and it's a very small sort of piece of work where we looked at if we have to do a larger sort of planning for forest protection and landscape restoration. So we adapted a globally known methodology, Rome, which IUCN and WRI have developed specifically for the Northeast and the shifting cultivation context. This is very, and we've looked at it only in context of Nagaland and in one district, where really to understand, what the land use challenge is. For instance, what is the fragmentation? What was the, what's happening with shifting cultivation areas, for instance, in terms of over the years, because any planning then would not be possible if you don't if you don't have information like that, and also validate some of these findings. This is very important. I mean, one, data is important to plan for more inclusive restoration, but data is also important if we want to really monitor then what's the progress been, which you kind of adhere to. So how do we also, once if inclusive restoration plans have been developed, then how do we really monitor progress against that? So data helps us in doing that, but data also would help us in actually through a restoration, for really to be successful, there needs to be a larger focus on how do we create a larger restoration economy around it. How does it really help building local livelihoods and jobs? How does it help in improving nutritional security, or different demands that local communities might have for food, fiber, etc. So data can actually help you do that. So planning, inclusive restoration plans can help you do that. So any sort of conversation around data and data gaps is also a conversation around how we sort of engage with different stakeholders, regionally, but also in different states, for instance, in India, or districts, and really develop those local inclusive plans. And this is lacking. I don't think so. There's sufficient data. I mean, there is data available, but there's a lot of fragmentation that's there, or inconsistency. So how do we sort of look at all of that together becomes important. So bringing all of this, very important, not only from the climate side of it, but also to really plan, build resilience, monitor better what we are doing well. How do we sort of build sustainable supply chains if we can do that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchika. I'll come back to you with a follow up question. Like you mentioned, this restoration economy, or the impact analysis. Probably we are not so good at. We are good at implementing. We're not so good at in capturing the result and have a long term monitor of how this benefits. We talk about intangible benefits for restoration, forest conservation, but in terms of tangible benefits, how the local people are getting benefited for the long term, we probably don't have that framework how to monitor. Maybe you can, if you have any experience in India, you can share. But before I give you the floor, let me welcome Mr. Amba, founder member, Integrated Mountain Initiative, to come to the stage, please. That's okay. Uh, so, I mean, since you just arrived, hot on the press, so I'll give you the floor right away. We talked about, Ruchika has mentioned an issue of indigenous community, how they've been integrated. And when we go to the field, a community is not homogeneous, there are heterogeneity. How we deal with it, and from your experience in Nagaland, how the rights of the indigenous community is been preserved in terms of restoration. Nowadays, we talk about nature-based solutions. IUCN is highlighting that. One of the criticism that's coming from is that is another how you protect the right of the indigenous community, whether NBS is another, will be like something like Red Plus, where indigenous community rights will be infringed upon. So there are debates, there are solutions, there are oppositions. What is your take in it from the Nagaland?
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was a little late because my earlier session just got over. So here I am. In the context of not just Nagaland, but the northeastern part of India, the rights of indigenous communities are pretty well protected by the constitution in terms of a sixth schedule for some states and Article 371 and many other articles that are there. So, in terms of tenurial rights, it's not as contested as it is in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. So, that is my first comment. But in terms of the rights of the community to plan and do things the way they want, or the lack of an FPIC process of development programs and policy regimes that make intrusions into common property land resources and regimes. I think that is where the issue is. It's a very thin line, and yet many a times alienation of communities when a lot of afforestation or rewilding activities are being undertaken, or in some cases not paying enough attention to native species that exist within the community forested areas, which could be of value in terms of spiritual, in terms of food, in terms of disaster risk reduction, and in so many other things. So, valuing biodiversity not only from an economic perspective, but also from a social capital perspective, I think is very, very important.
Excellent. I mean, this is very important. And next session where Dr. Khosla will be sharing exactly the what you say, like how you value. There is a monetary part. There is also a social side, value attachment, and how I mean how we can make it a balance. The social attachment still we have, but still the degradation is happening. So market is giving a different signal, and then maybe we will come back to Dr. Khosla to say a little few words about it. Um, and yeah, so before we give the chair to Dr. Khosla, maybe I'll go back to Vishwa, because he's also working on the indigenous community rights on the Meghna Basin, documenting the best practices in the both side of the border, and also challenges. The Vishwa, if you can share a few of your experiences.
Thank you, Raquibul. I have just because I was not sure that questions will come one by one. So I just wanted to, explore a few things today with everyone. And as I see is that today it's about, how we design and monitor rewilding initiatives to ensure benefit for both people and ecology. And a lot of issues around conservation versus nature-based solution and greenwashing is coming. So, and Ruchika also spoke about the need for data and monitoring. So, where is that framework which can help us actually avoid greenwashing and ensure that monitoring actually helps and benefits the local community and is sustainable? And then looking at some examples from Meghalaya on why it is important to strengthen the local community, and considering is the map of Meghna River Basin, which is shared by Bangladesh and India. What could be the motivation for rewilding in Meghna River Basin through cross-border collaboration? So I won't take much time. So we already mentioned, okay, bhai, so IUCN, I look at rewilding as something uh, similar to nature-based solution, which is about conserving the ecosystems for the benefits of the people. And here is a definition which was adopted by IUCN in World Conservation Congress 2016: actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that addresses societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being. So two sides of the issue: how we protect the ecosystem, rewild it, but how it is directly solving some of the societal challenges. So, on the question of ensuring how we ensure that any effort towards rewilding is right. It's not doesn't lead to maladaptation or something wrong. So or greenwashing. So here, I mean, IUCN has worked with more than 10,000 different stakeholders across the globe to develop a very detailed criterias and indicators to monitor nature-based solution initiatives. And the whole starting point here is how we address the societal challenges by working closely with the community who are actually affected. And then the criteria two is about thinking not just when we are doing a rewilding or nature-based solution, not just looking at the local site. It might be local intervention, but keeping the whole scale or the broader systems view in mind. And then it should lead to or contribute to SDGs like biodiversity, ecosystem integrity, viability, inclusive, transparent, and empowering government system. Criteria six is more linked to trade-offs. So basically, I mean, it's not many times what is happening is that you're just people are or it's as a greenwashing. It is proposed that okay, we need to restore this area and somewhere else we are losing. But understanding that how to equitably balance trade-offs is important. Then adaptive management is the criteria seven, and it's appropriate jurisdiction context for the NBA, so policy integration. Whether whatever we are doing, it is leading to any change in policy, improving it is the last criteria that we need to monitor. So this, I just wanted to quickly introduce this as a we are talking about data and monitoring of rewilding efforts. These criteria could be useful. Now, the point number two about inclusive governance. So here we see like one very good example of why indigenous community institutions should be our target. So Garo communities in Meghalaya's Garo Jayanti Khasi, they have a mission of conserving. Yeah. Yeah, just so what we have seen here is that locally, because of environmental or food security triggers, local communities, one good example from Meghalaya, where they started protecting Mashe, which is the tiger of the freshwater system, and they started conserving local pools where these Mashe aggregate and breed. And it was later supported by the local governments, and it was upscaled by through Meghalaya State Aquaculture Mission support, and now there are more than 100 sites. So one example where actually you see if something is led by local community, they understand the issue and they try to solve it. It has a scale. It can be up a scale very easily. Some result here, like what we have seen, is due to these conservation efforts, people are getting um, better catch in different parts of the river system. So this is one example we need to replicate and think about. Um, just last thing, when you're talking about the cross-border context, here is the like how we think about rewilding in the cross-border context. So one thing is like we are talking about nature economics, benefit sharing, and it's important to understand how any intervention, if it is benefiting a particular target, it would be, it could kind of generate some benefit for uh, the upstream people. And this is an example of the basin where you see that forest, the land, the ecosystem services coming from forest is mostly located in the Indian side, and it actually, but these is important for the what is happening in the Bangladesh in the Haur region, and what are the priorities and motivation for cross-border collaboration in Meghna Basin for rewilding. And what we have seen is that um, how we can better support the local community through the development of green value chain, diversified local livelihoods to manage forest degradation issues. Silting has been emerging as a big issue and motivation for the two countries to participate and collaborate because Haur is one of the food bowl for Bangladesh, and due to land use changes and climate change, silting has been becoming a big issue, and also floods, and also like working together on managing the water quality. So just wanted to share these like 3 points on the criteria for monitoring, the need for the inclusive um, uh, people, including the local institution, and thinking at a scale and finding motivation for the cross-border collaboration. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thinking in scale, uh, is, you know, when we're talking about this Eastern Himalaya and rewilding, and also the countries are divided politically, but the ecosystem is not. The rivers are not. So we have to think beyond the political border, and we have to think at the scale. But uh, how to do that? Maybe this is the question. I will come back to you, Vishwa, so you can give some example like your work on the ecosystem for life, Meghna Basin and the bridge. But before I get back to you, let's get back to Ruchira again. The question that Ruchira, that we have been discussing, that even the map that Vishwa has shown, we are very good at, the status analysis, but may not be we so good about the impact analysis of the good work of conservation we are doing. So if you have any example from India where you have followed through not only the implementation but the impact, the results, and the putting back in the planning process, because this is very important when we talk about rewilding restoration. We need to feed data, not only the physical data, but many other benefit data. The benefits can be tangible, benefit can be intangibles, market data. So over to you, Ruchika.
Thanks. I think yes, importance of data for monitoring or monitoring for impact is definitely essential. So I'll start with some of the learnings that we've had from our central work in Central India, where we've sort of we started with first we started first with the national context. I mean, when we think about restoration in the Indian context and the commitments that the commitments that Government of India has made, the first question that arises is how to identify what are the priority areas, which states, districts essentially to go to plan. So we with data support partnership from IUCN, Bharati Institute of Public Policy, Land Conflict Watch, and with University of Hyderabad, we developed the Restoration Opportunities Atlas for India, which really indicates the priority areas for restoration and the potential carbon sequestration potential as well, along with the key issues around enabling conditions, whether it's around tenure, what are the practices that are working or not, to be considered. But this is still national level data and it cannot be used for planning or implementation. So we paired this with the in Central India, in Eastern Madhya Pradesh, with more sort of deep dive analysis in terms of looking at data for planning for restoration, what we call as developing inclusive restoration plans. We use Rome, which is the global a global methodology developed by IUCN and WRI, but we adapted it for the local context, taking into consideration issues around governance, livelihoods, gender, multiple ecosystem services, etc., that are crucial for that. And most importantly, local stakeholder priorities and the local actor networks that need to be considered. We while developing the restoration opportunity plans for the district, and we had a diverse sort of stakeholders who inputted into it, more than 500 stakeholders including government officials, local farmers, panchayat heads, civil society organizations, etc. We also created a using technology created a baseline of tree cover and count for the region using FAO's open source collector tool, where we while collecting the tool itself, and I'm coming to monitoring for impact point, because it needs to be how we monitor with people. So when we even started collecting the baseline, there was we sort of did it with remote sensing expert, but local farmer groups or people who understand the landscape together, so that there's conversations already happening on what restoration looks like. And once the restoration plans were developed, we also sort of looked at what were the priorities for restoration that communities are really looking at. And here, learning from a bit of some of the global tools that WRI and FAO have developed, the Road to Restoration Guide, which actually sort of looks at the key entry points for restoration. I mean, people can do restoration for multiple things, and first to unpack what who local peoples are. So Dalits might want to do it for food, or is food security, or for just for biodiversity. Same for Adivasis. So it's a obviously a complete having that inclusive planning process becomes sort of important to look at. But when we start monitoring, when we have created these baselines, big challenge, at least on the restoration side, that happens is we can't really see progress from satellite images in the initial few years. So in Madhya Pradesh, what we are doing is you're developing a citizen science approach to monitoring. And here the larger sort of goal also is how do we sort of, partners, NGOs, civil societies would be in a particular landscape for only a certain number of years. So can we create larger conversations with local gram sabhas or local elected bodies or local user groups on restoration? So the citizen science app is essentially, a tool which is helping creating data, and on, what the current progress might be on restoration in the pilot that we are doing currently with government of Madhya Pradesh in 9,000 hectares. But it is also creating that larger conversation where local communities will discuss what to do in this area post the even the the current program ends. So when we talk about impact for monitoring for impact, I think it's also a question of how we sort of work with local communities and sort of have these conversations with them, that they are empowered, they understand what the data, and what are the different needs are, and the gram sabhas are having that conversations themselves, and data is helping in doing that. And the last point which we've sort of also realizing, and this is more from our learning of business for impact piece, we run something called a land accelerator in the South Asian context, where essentially the sort of based on some of the learnings that we've seen, that the in the SME sector, the businesses that are restoring farms and forests are at a very nascent stage globally as well as in India. So how do we sort of build capacities, help these sort of businesses, whether these are farmer producer organization or startups, businesses, to really build their capacities for doing restoration, but also monitoring. And I think one of the questions that we keep getting asked there is on monitoring for carbon, monitoring for different sort of other services, but monitoring for also social impact. So I think businesses need to do that also more systematically, and we need more of that. I think we don't have, there's a whole long road to sort of go, but monitoring for impact essentially would mean across the sort of for different stakeholders. With government stakeholders, it might be about inclusive restoration plans and then seeing how work is being implemented. But with businesses, it might be a slightly different approach.
Okay, thank you, Ruchika. I'll take one. You mentioned about data for empowerment and also your inclusive planning process. I'll go to Amba Zamir again. You mentioned about the difficulty or challenges with the FPIC process, and Ruchika mentioned about inclusive planning process. So, um, you know, in terms of these two aspects, how do you see um, this this challenge can be addressed?
I think it'll be a little bit like a cheating because I work with Ruchika. We work together for the experience in Nagaland for
Mm.
the restoration initiative. But anyway, I think what Ruchika said is very important, and this whole process of ensuring that whatever we do in terms of whether it's landscape restoration or rewilding or whichever way we call it, it has to be based upon what exists on the ground in terms of the evidences. It has to be based upon people's land use preferences also, not only in terms of just the the wilding benefits of what it is, and also most importantly understanding what is the community's perspective of land use. Why do they how do they design the land use? Is it just about keeping a forest as forest and keeping a landscape as a farm, or are there many other categories in between? It could be a bamboo grove, it could be a palm tree grove, it could be an orchid grove, it could be an endemic mushroom growing sprouting area, and so many other things. And I think that is very important to keep in mind, because each one of these provide different services, not just for the community but also in terms of the ecosystem, in terms of ecosystem service. That is one. The other thing is also the whole issue of benefits, who benefits what. And in this again, there are different benefits for women and different benefits for men. And I think that's very important to keep in mind when we're talking about benefits from the ecosystem, because in many cases, especially from the perspective of uh, agrobiodiversity, it is the women and their knowledge system and their ability to do what they do best in terms of storing heritage seeds, in terms of identifying it, in terms of managing it, in terms of growing it. I think that's really, really critical. And we need to ensure that the the FPIC processes are not just done only with the community institutions, which can be very patriarchal in many cases, in many areas, but ensure that with the women and the young people, the youth, their voices really, really need to be involved. Because if the youth are not involved, it is a long-term plan that we're talking about. And if the youth's perspective is not in that plan, then as it is, our mountains are getting more and more emptier. And that is the elephant in the room. People are migrating out of the mountains, out of the hills. The villages are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And so when on one hand here we are talking of all innovations and investments up in the mountains, but on the other hand is the fact that the people that are supposed to be there, the real managers of the resources are also moving out. And therefore, how do we make sure that there is a balance in terms of this? So I think these are some of the challenges we need to really keep in mind when we discuss these issues. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you very much. Now, from the high Himalaya and the mountain, we'll come down to the plain, the Bangladesh. We have Iqbal Abdullah Harun, Mr. Iqbal Abdullah Harun, Additional Secretary for Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. We heard from the practitioner's view. Now, we also heard from the government of Bhutan. From the you are serving long time in the government. You have been working in investment, working with the IMF, the finance department, finance ministry, now in the environment ministry. From your perspective, from your wide range of experience, how do you see the restoration aspects in Bangladesh is going? Do you think we have been successful? Do you think there are some challenges, and how do we address these challenges in Bangladesh? Some successes and challenges.
Yeah, thank you very much. Greetings to the fellow panelists. I think it's a very unique feeling to be a panelist from the seventh most climate vulnerable countries and working for the government and working for the Ministry of Forest, Climate Change and Environment. I think we already heard about different aspects of the challenges that we are having across the world and maybe the region that we are talking about. From our perspective, I like to set the things into perspective, and then I'll go back to how we are going to tackle. First thing is to think of a country which has got more than 200 rivers and which has got 1,100 people living in per square kilometer. So the intensity of the population and their need to the nature and their daily life dependency on the nature is I think, extremely high. And that is definitely an issue that we should be thinking about while we are thinking about forest, rewilding, biodiversity, and any other words you say, because communities are going to the nature for many things, and they are basically using the nature as the need. Being in the government, it is always challenging, but we have some techniques that we can share with others. We have several. I was counting. We have 48 legislation that is related to the climate change directly or indirectly. So, having said that, we have very direct climate change related legislations, starting with the Delta Plan 2100, which goes more than 90 years when it was produced. That is basically how we are going to the end of the century, if we start now, and how we can link the other documents with the long target of 2100, year 2100. For clarity, I'm saying that year 2100. We have a Mujib Prosperity Plan, basically that to counteract the climate-induced damage and losses for vulnerable communities and making resilience and as such, bringing the stability in the life. So that's another document that we say. We have got our climate change action and strategic plan. That is basically the tool that we use. And we recently produced the National Adaptation Plan that says that how we are going to adapt with the situation that we are facing. And apart from all these bad things, we also committed for the NDCs. That is also something worth mentioning here. Now coming back to the restoration and rewilding, because that involves forest, that involves biodiversity and other things. As we are from the mangrove area, Sundarban is the biggest forest that we have, and it is one of the unique mangroves in the world. It is still inhabited by 114 Royal Bengal tiger, many of the deers community, and different other species. And it is, you know, that it is the one of the World Heritage Site. So our activities are we are trying to implement is through the different projects specific on the issues that we are facing in different parts of Sundarban, different parts of the country, and different parts of the, like, you know, depending on the situation, either in the like, you know, char area, in the salinity area, or maybe in the hill area as well. So we have more than 200,000 hectares of areas we plan to be restored, which is in hill, through the species that we use for deforestation. We have elephant, gharial, dolphin, vulture, shark, and rays. But again, we have different programs for that, and we are trying to conserve each of the communities. But again, in the Sundarban, you know that it's a big area, but it's very difficult to manage it through the forest department itself manually. So we have got a smart patrolling system we recently introduced that uses a drone and based on the stations, so that rapid response teams can reach the area where poachers or intruders can be detected and can be apprehended. So that's something that we are trying to use. Again, we declared 53 protected areas. We have 13 ecologically critical areas, and we have 2 marine protected areas. So those are another ways that we are trying to protect the biodiversity as well as the forestry. We are trying to use the land, since we have very limited land left for the forestation. So we are trying to use the linear parts of the areas, means roadside and other areas, where we are having the co-management for social forestry, so that each of the tree planted will be owned by one of the partners of the forest department. And once they have that ownership, they keep like, you know, taking care of the tree, and they get the benefit out of that once it is big and it is sold, and they replace with another one. We declared 52% area of our Sundarban as wildlife sanctuary. But I think we need to do more, because Sundarban is the only forest that we have with a lot of biodiversity present there. So I think, as I said, the tiger conservation, we have a tiger response team. We have we have camera trapping for the movement of the tiger and how they are surviving there. We have wildlife crime control teams in the area. Another species is elephant that is also being threatened by the human interference. So we see different newses, but we started to working with the communities, so that they will be rewarded if all their like producers are lost to elephant attack. So they will be compensated fully. It should be double. If they lose 100, they will get 200. So that is what we are doing, and we are trying to give some fencing so that people are alerted, and also the elephant can understand that there is a barrier. So these are few things we think that we are trying to face the challenges. Although we have long-term action plan like the tiger action plan, like dolphin action plan for 15 to 20 years long, and definitely those are the supporting things. Maybe I can come back if that there is a chance. Thank you very
No,
much.
thank you very much. I mean, thank you for explaining that Delta plan, which is a kind of 100-year visioning plan, and also the Mujib Prosperity Plan, turning the climate vulnerability, not but stating in a different way that it is we need to prosper despite all the challenges, and country of 170 million people, managing biodiversity, managing. Unlike Bhutan, it's a so heavily dense area, but still the biodiversity is thriving. It itself is, I would say, a accolade. But there are a lot more, many things to do, many things to learn. Just 1 minute to Sonam. So you have seen the complete contrast. 71% forest coverage in Bhutan. Bangladesh, probably we have 15 to 20%. 170 million. We have about 3,000, on average, about 1,000 people. And a few of the areas where the density is more than 10,000. But still, we have biodiversity there. If you go a little up, where the indigenous community, Sylhet region and the Manipur, Nagaland, look at the whole landscape. What is the one word or one wisdom you can share for rest of the countries? Because when we say rewilding in Eastern Himalaya, it's not one single country. It's the landscape that we are talking about. One single word or one single sentence or just 1 minute, your wisdom, how these 3-4 countries can come together for this landscape restoration.
I would say collaboration, and if I may, I use another word. I would say integrity. So basically, if I put it in the sentence, I would say that we collaborate to ensure maintaining the ecological integrity of the ecosystems. I think that should be our goal. So through the rewilding program, actually, because I think until or unless we maintain or restore the ecological integrity of the ecosystems, then I would I would say that we would not have achieved our goals. So I think maintaining the ecological integrity is a must.
Thank you. 2 words you mentioned: ecological integrity, and the most important word you said, collaboration. I'll ask the same question to Dr. Khosla. In your wide span of experience of environmentalism, how do you see where we are heading towards? Kind of projection in the future. What is the future you see?
Thank you. I recognize I'm an interloper here. I was just misguided and I came up on the stage. I'm visiting from the future because my session is the next one. But I have been involved in this field for about 40 years. Our first project was in Bundelkhand, which is actually one of the most fragile ecosystem zones in India, and also one of the most fragile economies. And we got into the business of what you might call forest natural regeneration by taking lands that had been completely degraded, semi-urban. They were peripheral to small towns, but these were obtained on a lease from the forest department, And what we basically did was protect them from animals and ensure that every drop of water that came stayed in that area. So basically, within 15 months, we could regenerate a natural forest. Right? It's incredible how strong nature is. There was plenty of rootstock, and it became a forest. After that, I realized that this was a reasonably benign way of and affordable way of bringing back forests. And later on, when we had this meeting of IUCN in Bonn, I was chairing it, and we declared the Bonn Challenge, which essentially has a tremendous amount of ambition, about 300 million hectares, which a large part of which have been pledged by governments and by private sector. And it seems to me that the name of the game is scale. And obviously, we need to converge. So my word, single word, in addition to collaboration, is convergence. We need to bring all these ideas about rewilding, nature-based solutions, etc., into the regeneration sort of bag. And there's a big Venn diagram of these different concepts. They're really not that different. They're been brought about because of institutional identities, for funding reasons, for a variety of other reasons. But actually, they all mean more or less the same. Nature-based solutions were essentially this for climate change. Rewilding was essentially this for raising donations, essentially for carbon sequestration. So a lot of this is really going off in slightly different tangents, thinking we're doing different things. But convergence of these might well be a very solid way of proceeding forward.
Absolutely important. I think the organizers can take away two words or wise words from this session. One is a collaboration. We need collaboration. We understand that diversity, but within that diversity there are opportunity and convergence. We are talking about so many acronyms, so many processes, so many things. It's easy to get confused, That the convergence that, as Dr. Khosla has mentioned, I think this is, I mean, is a kind of a horizontal expansion rather than vertical. Of course, we need vertical knowledge, but we also need a horizontal linkages of those vertical knowledges. With that word, I think we will finish. Unless any question from the floor, maybe we can take one. We are kind of over time. We are eating up Dr. Khosla's session, next session. So if you have any one question, otherwise we will gonna close this session. I think there is none. So let me thank you very much, all the distinguished panelists on stage and online, Vishwa, Ruchika, Sonam, Dr. Iqbal, Jasim, and Dr. Khosla. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.